Hey guys, and welcome back. Hey, let me ask you a question, and feel free to respond in the comments on this video. What is your favorite Christmas movie? This time of year comes with a lot of things, the trees, the lights, the presents, but it also comes with some of our favorite movies about Christmas. Everything from Elf to A Christmas Story to Christmas Vacation, cheesy Hallmark movies, and so many others in between. And we love these movies, right? And we can quote just about every line of these movies if we need to. And they each tell this story that we're so acquainted with, and we watch them over and over again every Christmas. And one of those movies that my family really enjoys to watch every year is called The Star. It came out 3 years ago, and it's about it's mostly about the donkey that Mary and Joseph supposedly ride on and take to Bethlehem, and his story of how he becomes the donkey that carries Jesus into Bethlehem. And it's really a cute story, and it reminds us of so many of the truths of Christmas, even if it does embellish a few things and add a few things in that weren't really a part of the original Christmas story. We're going to take a look at some of those moments, some of those pieces of the Christmas story that we're familiar with, that we think of them as intrinsic, right? Part of the Christmas story, when in reality, they may not have happened exactly as we remember them. So let's dive into today's fake Christmas story. All right, so first I should clarify, we know that the Christmas story that we find in the Bible, the story of the birth of Jesus, is true, it's factual, and we believe in this story and that this is how it happened. But sometimes we do add some things into the story, or maybe we aren't even conscious that we've done that, but that we have in different ways and in different traditions. You know, one of the most timeless traditions at any church during the Christmas season is the Christmas story pageant, right, or the play, where the little kids dress up as Jesus and Mary and Joseph and the wise men and the shepherds, and they march down the aisles, and all the parents take pictures of them. Some of you may have been a part of that. I know I was. I think I played a shepherd one year. Never got to be Joseph, though, right? Everybody wants to be Mary or Joseph. But anyway, one of the characters in that play is the innkeeper, right? There's always an innkeeper. You know, he's the grumpy guy who kind of crosses his arms and shakes his head when Mary and Joseph ask if there's any room in the inn. And then he points over to the stable and tells them they can stay there, you know. And he's probably the most important person in the whole play, because without him, the whole manger scene doesn't happen, right? There are no sheep, there are no donkeys. The problem is, and you may have heard this before, the Bible never mentions an innkeeper. Here's what it says in Luke chapter 2. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. So there's no mention in the story of an innkeeper who turns them away and tells them he doesn't have any space for them. In fact, the word that we translate as inn probably more likely means guest room. See, Mary and Joseph, when they went to Bethlehem, they probably would have stayed with some relatives of theirs who lived in Bethlehem. And typically, they would have stayed in the guest room, a room that was prepared for this family to receive guests, to have people stay the night. But seeing as everybody was having to come into town, it was kind of like Christmas Vacation, right? Everybody's piled into one house. There was no space for them to sleep in the guest room, and so they stayed in what probably would have been a back room attached to the house, where the people brought the animals into the house at night, so they didn't get stolen or eaten or anything bad. And so Mary and Joseph were essentially in the back room, and there was a manger there, a feeding trough for the animals that Jesus would have been laid down into. So the problem with that, you know, is we've grown so accustomed to the story of Joseph and Mary, and how where they stayed, and where they where they lived, and where Jesus was laid down, and the fact that there was no room for them in the inn. We've grown so accustomed to those things that we attach these deep truths and deep meanings to them. I mean, after all, Jesus being born in a stable surrounded by animals out in the cold night air, it shows us how humble he is, right? The thing is, we don't need a grumpy innkeeper or a cold stable to understand the impact of Jesus' birth, right? Jesus is by his very nature the Son of God, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Logically, he should have come from some kind of royal family who was rich and wealthy and they had power and prestige. He should have been born as a prince and he should have been in line for the throne. His coming, his birth should have been met with parties and parades and holidays, right? He's deserving of all of this and so much more. But that's what makes his coming so incredible, because he didn't come with pomp and circumstance. He didn't come with wealth and power and influence. Instead of all those things, instead of being born as one of the elites, Jesus came to earth in about as normal a way as possible during that time. He came to earth in an ordinary family, being born in relatively ordinary circumstances. Yeah, some parts of the story are unique and are miraculous, but in general, he was probably not the only child born in Bethlehem around that time, right? It was a perfectly ordinary thing. And what it shows us is that Jesus came for all people at all times. There are roughly about 24 people who today alive who could be called a king or a queen. And most of those people don't even really have any real power. It's just kind of they're a figurehead. So 24 people, that's about 0.00000037% of the world's total population. And they live lives that you and I probably can't even imagine, right? They have power, prestige, influence, things that we'll never touch, and that's out of reach of the overwhelming majority of people. Jesus didn't live a life of privilege. He didn't live in luxury. His parents didn't have money. They weren't royalty. In fact, the presents that the Magi bring, the wise men bring, probably funded their escape to Egypt. That's probably the only way they could have afforded to get to Egypt. They were an average family, and most of the circumstances around his birth were fairly normal. And yet, at the same time, it was extraordinary, because you have God himself, the creator of the universe, who steps down into his creation, who becomes one of us, and is truly God with us, Emmanuel. He's not this distant ruler. He's not this sovereign king who he doesn't come in Bethlehem as this sovereign king who is so high above all of the other people that he can't even walk amongst them. He's born as a baby, lives this ordinary life, and grows into a man and lives a perfect life on our behalf, because he is for us. He is for every person under the sun who has ever lived, and he is the gift of God. And we don't need we don't need an innkeeper. We don't need a stable. We don't need all of these things that we've added to the story to help us realize how humble and amazing and gracious Jesus' birth in Bethlehem was. And it should cause us to rejoice, right? We've been going through Advent in our worship services and seeing the Advent candles being lit. And today was the candle of joy, right? We can rejoice in Jesus' birth because he came for us. He came to be God with us. And so this Christmas, don't lose sight of that fact, right? That Jesus came for you. 2,000 years ago in the city of Bethlehem, there was born a Savior who is Christ the Lord. And he was given to you, that you would know him, that you would believe in him, and that you would be saved, and you would spend eternity with him. So be encouraged this Christmas season that Jesus is God's gift, not just to the world as a whole, but to you, and that he is God with us.